Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome, and thank you for tuning in today. This is a special hour dedicated to understanding enlightenment, what it means and what it just might be to be enlightened. Indeed, an hour devoted to learning something more about ourselves, an hour for those who dare to challenge some of those old ideas about the world we live in and what we believe. I'm Eldon Taylor, and this is Provocative Enlightenment. All right. Every week I read some of your letters as our way of paying respect to the very important role you play in making this show successful. Last week our guest was Emma Bragdon, and we spoke about John of God and Spiritism, particularly the use of healing practices employed by Spiritists. If you missed the show, be sure to catch it in the archives. Evelyn wrote, "Thank you, Eldon, for having Emma Bragdon on your show today. She so clearly gave her message of how our human society is evolving, not only in the physical, but more meaningfully in the spiritual aspect of our existence." Mary Ellen wrote, "Thank you, Eldon, for your interview with Dr. Bragdon. I think she has been on in the list of best on your show. I have been looking at her books online. I am interested in learning more about spiritual emergence, both because of my own experiences as I have grown spiritually and as a pastor to others whose lives may include these experiences." Joanne wrote, "Love the show and love to know and love to grow and love it all." And I love that letter. How about you, Rev?
Of course.
Wendy wrote, "Love your radio show. So enlightening. I always get something I need out of every show, even if I don't think I will at the top of the show." Maria wrote, "Thank you so much for the free InnerTalk MP3 files. I am looking forward to listening to them. I am listening to you on Hay House Radio right now." Now, I'll just use your letter, Maria, to segue into reminding our audience that they, too, can pick up their free MP3 program by simply going to my website and choosing free programs from the left-hand navigation pane. Michael wrote, "As a 66-year-old father, clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, and transformational coach, your evident mastery of wakefulness and brilliant InnerTalk mind technology has arrived at perfectly precise moment in my soul's journey to embody self-realization and service to consciousness, leaving me dumbstruck in awe and wonderment. Thank you." Now, I'm not sure what to say with regard to that, so I'll just leave it. I'll just return it. Thank you, Michael. Jean wrote, "I just finished reading I Believe, and what does that mean? Your writing is so exceptional, and you articulate thoughts and concepts with such profundity. You have elevated the English language to an art form. Your work is a joy to me. Thank you." Well, wow. Thank you, Jean. I am truly grateful and humbled by your words. All right, that's all the time we're going to take for letters today, but I do invite you to opine by sending your email to eldon@eldontaylor.com or by joining me on Facebook. You can tell us how to make our show better. You can, we love your compliments, but if you see an opportunity, something that we might improve on, please let us know that too. We can't get all of your letters on the air, but they do impact our programming, and I thank you for your feedback and continued support. Now to today's show, Communicating with the Other Side. The book is Talking to the Dead by George Noory and Rosemary Ellen Guiley. For the past century, inventors have been inspired by the spirits themselves to create telephone, video, radio, and computers to attempt real-time two-way communication with the dead and other entities. Do spirit communication devices really work? What are the prospects of someday being able to pick up a cell phone or sit in front of a webcam and talk to the other side? The new book, Talking to the Dead, explores the colorful history and personalities behind spirit communications, weaving together spirituality, metaphysics, science, and technology. It examines the idea that new technology can connect to the ancient and universal wisdom of the music of the spheres, and that contact with the spirit realms can be made through the vibrations of sound. We will be speaking with both authors today. Joining us first is Rosemary. Rosemary Guiley. Let me make sure that I get that in. Rosemary Ellen Guiley is one of the leading experts on the paranormal, with more than 50 books published by major houses on a wide range of paranormal, spiritual, and mystical topics, including 9 single-volume encyclopedias. Her work is translated into 15 languages. She has worked full-time in the paranormal since 1983, researching, investigating, writing, and presenting, as well as teaching. Her present work focuses interdimensional entity contact experiences of all kinds, technological and mediumistic spirit communications, spiritual growth and development, problem hauntings, and portals, or geographic areas of intense paranormal activity. She spends a great deal of time out in the field conducting investigation, so let's get her in here. Welcome to Provocative Enlightenment, Rosemary Ellen Guiley.
Hello, Eldon.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I love the book. I have to tell you that. It's very nicely done. It's to the point. It's quick. It's fast, and it absolutely keeps you involved. So to begin with, tell us a little bit about how and why you became interested in the paranormal.
Like many people who wind up being researchers and investigators in the field, I had intriguing childhood experiences. I think almost all children have some sort of paranormal experiences or encounters because children are very open that way. And for most of us, the experiences recede into the background. We may even forget them. For me, they stayed at the forefront, and some of that was because other members of my family were experiencers, especially my mother, and it whetted my curiosity about the unseen and what all is out there. As I got older, I wanted to experience more and also to understand it, why all people don't have the same uniform experiences, and what are the circumstances when people have a paranormal experience. Are we poking our head through an interdimensional doorway? Is there a bleed-through? Skeptics will say it's all in your head, your imagination, something which I always found hard to accept as an experiencer myself. So all of these things led to my professional occupation now in the paranormal, and it's a fascinating field. It's just never-ending, constantly unfolding with new developments and discoveries.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, reading the material, I'm unclear. It would appear that you also are somewhat of a medium. Is that correct?
I don't really call myself a medium, and I don't work as a medium or a psychic, but I do use my own natural psychic abilities in my work. It's almost impossible to spend a lot of time researching and investigating paranormal phenomena without engaging the psychic senses, which everybody has naturally to some degree. And my mom had a lot of precognitive ability and, numerous entity contact experiences. And so I wanted to develop my own abilities when I was young, and I started experimenting with dream sending and astral travel in dreams when I was in my teens. And one thing led to another. I took courses in intuitive training, psychic development, and related topics like that, and developed my own abilities. A medium is someone who communicates with the dead, and that's not something I do professionally. Mediums are psychic. Not all psychics are mediums. Some psychics, my own inclination is more oriented toward the wide range of things, the human dead as well as other kinds of entities. So a lot of things get in the mix for me. But when I do an investigation, I will often get a lot of impressions about a place and about the people in the place, and those get folded into an assessment of an area that's augmented with whatever equipment can tell us as well.
Okay, so you're not a James Von Prague. You don't do readings for the dead or for people through the dead, but you do use your psychic gifts in your investigations. I have that, right?
Well, yes, I sometimes do readings for people, but I don't work professionally as a psychic. It's an adjunct to what I do.
I see. All right. Now, your book is much more than a lighthearted romp, exploring the possibility of life after death, or for that matter, a deeply scientific treatise involving, say, the engineering aspects of EVP, although you cover a good deal of that and the technologies. Where you do a seriously excellent job, in my opinion, with both of these areas, you also get into some really hotly contested areas. And since this is provocative enlightenment, you know that we're going to ask you about those. So one of them is, sex in the afterlife. Let's spend some time on some of these provocative, controversial areas. So first, if you will, Rosemary, tell us about the traditional expectation by way of religious orientation regarding sex in the afterlife, and then enlighten us with what you have learned as a result of your direct communication, please.
The communications of people who are in the afterlife vary quite a bit from what we're taught via religion. And most Westerners have a concept of the afterlife as a fairly static place, that we go through an assessment or a judgment that is probably imposed on us, and that how good we were during life determines where we will spend the rest of the afterlife. And if we're good, we go to heaven in a pleasant place, and if we did bad and evil things, then we're consigned to hell where we live in unhappiness and torment. In either of those states, if you have no body and you're in a spirit state, you certainly wouldn't have any sort of need for physical pleasure. But communications from the afterlife paint a much different picture, that there are forms that people can take in the afterlife, and that the afterlife is a very fluid place that really doesn't conform exactly with what religions teach us. Yes, there are good places and not so good places, and even very uncomfortable places, but we're not consigned to any one place for eternity. We have the opportunity to grow and redeem ourselves even in the afterlife. There are varying concepts of reincarnation. And in spirit form and even astral form, there are ways of maintaining pleasurable relationships with people that we have known during life. And there are some even very vivid descriptions of this in the channeled literature, in the mediumistic communication literature. And even some of the religious authorities from the past have weighed in with opinions as to whether or not we can have sex or should have sex. They've always been very uncomfortable with addressing it, however.
So, despite the discomfort, bottom line is some say yes and some say no?
Well, my opinion of the afterlife is that it is a fluid state of existence. That is, it changes. We progress and grow in it and probably expand into levels of the afterlife that might be inaccessible to us in the consciousness that we're in bodies. So we might have a very limited idea of the afterlife. But I do believe that we reunite with people that we knew during life, and since I believe in reincarnation, that we knew in other lifetimes and maybe in other places besides Earth, and that we are capable of having different kinds of relationships with them. I do think that we communicate by telepathy, and we have different abilities in the afterlife, but we can commingle energy in different ways, in spirit form or perhaps in some sort of astral forms that would be just as pleasurable as physical sex is here in this life. And that we grow and change in the afterlife and probably at some point make decisions about whether or not we want to incarnate into physical forms again.
Interesting. Your co-author, who will join us in the second half of the show, is Mr. George Noory of Coast to Coast AM. But before George became the host of Coast to Coast, you and George used to do a lot of shows together. And one of the interesting things that I found in your book is the discussion that you've had with George many times on his radio shows, both Coast to Coast and earlier, having to do with dreams and how dreams themselves can be a form of mediumship and have been throughout history, or a primary channel, shall we say, to communicate with the other side. Now, I readily recognize how a medium communicates with the other side, but how do we interpret dreams? How do you see dreams fitting into this schema, Rosemary?
There are dreams that take us beyond our earthly life. Most of our dreams have to do with situations in life and how we think we're doing in life. They're kind of a barometer that feeds back information to us that pertains to our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. Our dreams give us a lot of information about things that get out of kilter, and they provide material for solutions to our problems and difficulties. But there are certain dreams that penetrate these other spiritual realities, these big dreams, and Carl Jung addressed that so well with his depth psychology. Dreams were very important to him, and he had many astounding dreams that really led him to develop his entire body of work, and also to resurrect the importance of alchemy in modern-day thought and living.
Let me interrupt you for a second, if I may. I just want to make sure I understand this. You're saying that the intuitive process, or that process, that creative process that some would just think of that takes place in dreams, is actually he was channeling that information in his sleep from the other side. Do I have that correct?
Well, I really can't say where Carl Jung got his information channeled from. It could have come from the collective unconscious. It could have come from his higher self, from spirit guides. I think we have many sources that feed into our dreams, but they have a spiritual component that transcends our concerns in ordinary life. Everybody has these dreams. And what I was saying was that Jung addressed this aspect of dreaming very well. And dreams have always been of interest to George and myself, and that's really how we met each other, was through the significance of dreams, and that they have a psychic component, and sometimes they do see into the future, and sometimes they do take us into transcendent realities where we have deep, meaningful experiences that even can be life-changing. There are miraculous dreams where we are healed in dreams.
You know, a half hour does not do justice to the depth and breadth of your knowledge, to say nothing of what's in this book. But I have to ask you about, another really controversial issue.
Sure.
Tell us about the Jinn. What exactly are we dealing with there?
The Jinn are, in mythology and lore, a race of supernatural entities who existed on this planet and still do from an interdimensional perspective before human beings came into existence. And entity contact experiences, if we go back in history and examine the record of how people have their experiences and how they describe them and identify these presences and energies, human beings have had core experiences throughout history. We've put different labels on them and explained them in different ways, but the key ingredients are the same. Human beings encounter other residents of other dimensions that seem to be able to penetrate ours. And the Jinn are among those entities. According to their own creation story, which we find with other entities as well, human beings push them out of this space, and that accounts for their existence in another dimension. Well, the Jinn, I do believe, have a strong presence in a lot of our paranormal activity. Places that are haunted, sometimes people who are pestered by spirits or even possessed by spirits entities that in the West we would probably call demons, in other cultures would be called Jinn, and the name means the hidden ones. So I have come to the conclusion over the course of years and years of investigating cases that the Jinn are among the players out there interacting with human beings. And I think that we are seeing an increase in entity contact experiences in general, which is one of the reasons why talking to the dead is a very timely topic, because the dead aren't the only ones who are reaching through the veils to communicate with us. There are other entities as well, and the technology is applying to all things across the board. And I think that at some point in the future, I don't know if it's going to be in the next generation or so, or maybe even sooner than that, but at some point human beings are going to have to redefine their own backyard. It's not going to be just us and the occasional strange paranormal experience. It's going to be us interacting regularly with the dead in the afterlife and entities in other dimensions. Our cosmic backyard, so to speak, is going to expand quite a bit.
You know, I spent years practicing criminalistics, running lie detection tests. When you say that, I think, okay, what's the lie detection test to determine the good guys from the bad guys when you open up this kind of communication? You know, first of all, Rosemary, we're going to have you back. Will you come back to the show?
I'd love to, Eldon.
Well, good. And I'd love to just spend an entire hour, because there is so much that I could ask you. And we're about, you know, our first half hour is about gone. So I want everybody to know how to contact you and where they can find your book. So please share that with everybody now.
My main website is visionaryliving.com. I have a complimentary e-newsletter that you can sign up for on the homepage called Strange Dimensions, and a library of articles based on my work, as well as my calendar. And I do travel around to speak quite a bit. George and I are planning some other projects. I'm very excited about that. I've really loved working with George over the years, and Coast to Coast has been so important to get a lot of information out to people. And people need good, solid, objective information about a lot of these topics so they can make their own decisions and also validate their own experiences, and that's very important.
Yeah, Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, and you're a regular guest there. And I would encourage everyone in our audience to do check out the website, do look at the newsletters, the information that's posted on Rosemary's site. It's in this area, it's hard to find somebody that has more experience, that has been involved in more investigations than Rosemary. And as I said when we introduced her, you know, we've got the encyclopedia woman here. All right, Rosemary, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it very much, and we will schedule you back to the show again soon. The book is Talking to the Dead, and I urge you all to get it. Be sure and stay tuned. Right after the break, we'll be joined by Mr. George Noory, Coast to Coast AM himself.
Life is a journey. Each choice we make takes us down a certain path. But what if you found out the choices you made were not in fact your own, or that hidden forces have kept you from reaching your true potential? Are you ready to break free? Read Eldon Taylor's New York Times bestseller, Choices and Illusions, now revised, expanded, and updated. Many have praised Eldon's breakthrough work. Actress and author Linda Evans said, "He's given us the tools to transform our minds and therefore our lives." Actress, author, and advocate Lindsay Wagner said, "Enjoy the journey. I did." Psychic medium and author John Edwards said about Choices and Illusions, "Read this book. We are living at a time when people are searching for answers to fundamental questions in their lives. This book can be, if applied, a roadmap to personal enlightenment and empowerment. I believe it can tune in the frequency you are currently operating on. More important, it helps you see that you can manifest change. Choices and Illusions is available from all fine bookstores, including Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. For more information, please go to www.eldontaylor.com/choices and illusions. Get your copy today. Your life will never be the same.
We are all very aware of the power of belief, but are you aware that many times it is your inner beliefs that cause you to sabotage your own dreams and goals? Success is so much more likely when your inner beliefs are in line with your outer goals. And now, using Eldon Taylor's InnerTalk technology, you can do just this. InnerTalk is a patented subliminal technology and is the only such technology to be researched by numerous independent universities and institutions, including Stanford, and been demonstrated effective at priming your self-talk. There are hundreds of titles to choose from, ranging from weight loss to esteem, organized and efficient to prosperity and abundance, attracting the right love relationship to winning sports performance, accelerated learning to accelerated healing. Eldon Taylor's patented InnerTalk technology is your key to success. Check it out today. Visit www.innertalk.com. That's INNERTALK.com. InnerTalk.com.
Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
And welcome back. If you just joined us, we're joined now by the co-author to the marvelous book, Talking to the Dead, Mr. George Noory. George is a favorite of mine. And in fact, no, I've got to restate that. He is my favorite radio host of all time. He has been with us before, and I'm sure you all know who he is, but just in case, George Noory is the host of the nationally syndicated Coast to Coast AM. He is heard 5 days a week by millions of listeners. Coast to Coast AM airs on approximately 564 stations in the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and Guam, and across the World Wide Web. From his first days as a radio broadcaster, George says, and I'll quote, "I wanted to cover stories that the mainstream media never touch, the unusual, the paranormal, and things like that. I learned that broadcast was the best business for exploring these issues, and I've been doing it for 33 years. End quote. And I would add, doing it well. If you have not listened to Coast AM, you owe yourself the treat. Do yourself a favor and tune in. So let's get him in here. Welcome to Provocative Enlightenment, Mr. George Noory.
Eldon, always a pleasure to be on your show. It's like a role reversal for us, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I love chatting with you. That's all there is to it, and we're honored to have you join us. I meant what I said at the top of the show. You are the best. And so as far as I'm concerned, it's a great opportunity to have you on the show and to be able to talk to you. I have to ask you this. On any given night, you deal with guests and callers covering everything imaginable, spiritual, paranormal, mystical, and more. And in your words, George, they often, quote, push the edges. So, of all the books that you could write, why did you choose this one, Talking to the Dead?
This, for me, Eldon, was an evolution in my own personal life. I had gone through some earlier books, Worker in the Light, Journey to the Light, and this one was the next step for me. I have always been obsessed with death and the other side. There are a number of things that have occurred in my life during my lifespan that have always caused me to question and wonder about what could be on the other side. And what I wanted to do through Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who is a tremendous researcher, and she was just on, it was to at least take the next step forward to see, is it real? Does it exist? What are the possibilities? Whether I always believed it or not wasn't the point. I wanted to see for myself what was out there. And strangely enough, Eldon, and sadly enough, after this book was published, my father died at the age of 88. It was, for me, my very first experience of close death. I've I've had a friend who has died of cancer years ago, and I've seen other people, of course, at funeral homes, of which I hate going. But this was the closest for me. And it couldn't have come at a worse time and at a more opportune time, in that after the book was written, Talking to the Dead, and we had done our research, I'm convinced there's something on the other side. And after my dad died, as sad as it was and as tragic as it was, and he lived until he was 88, and he had fallen, and had he not fallen, he'd still be out there. It told me that, it exists, it goes on. He's in a different plane of existence. Not to be worried, George. Miss him, of course, but, he's in another place, and you're going to be in another place, George, eventually, too. And just keep forging ahead. And that's one of the main things I learned from Talking to the Dead, that we move on, and we exist, and I think it's what drives me and pushes me to continue to unravel these mysteries that you've talked about, and I'm just not going to stop.
What a great place or a great comfort that is. I've lost my parents. It's difficult for me, George, to even imagine how someone who has these strong atheistic views copes with that. I've never been able to get my hands around it. I mean, the idea that you have done the research and so you're now comforted must speak volumes to you.
I always believed, even at a very young age, that there was more to our existence than what meets the eye. I don't know if it was intuitive, perceptiveness, my upbringing, but I was always fascinated by just what is out there in the universe. I mean, without being too religious, much more spiritual, I realized at a very young age that this thing in the universe we call life was not an accident. It wasn't a chance happening. It just, you just didn't roll the dice, and here we are. There's just too much order to it. I don't know what God is, Eldon. I really don't. But I do know that it's intelligent, and it's divine, and it's got an ability to create, and that's where we are right now. And I'll continue to question and to look for these answers about our own existence. But I am so convinced that there is something out there that has created this wonderment that we call life, this wonderment that we call the universe, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I totally concur with that. And I love the way you use your radio show to investigate that. And I would encourage all of our listeners who have an interest in these areas to tune in for that reason. You state rather matter-of-factly, by the way, that today the technology exists for real-time two-way contact with the dead. So I've got two questions that naturally arise from that. The first is, please, tell us more about that technology. The second, George, and I don't, I want to be careful with this because I want to respect your feelings, but have you attempted to use it in any way to communicate with your father?
I'll answer the second question first, Eldon. No, I haven't attempted it yet because I'm in a waiting period, and I want some time for me to go before I get into this. And, and I want him to have some time. I'm kind of looking for ways for him to try to approach me first. And, I want to see what he does and how he does it, whether he comes to me in a dream state or through one of these electronic gizmos that are out there. So I'm waiting on that. But in terms of the technology, of course it happened a long time ago. Thomas Edison was always interested in developing some kind of technology that would allow us to communicate with the dead. Spirit Clom was out there. The Frank's box is out there. And there's new technology that comes out every day. I think what this tells us, more importantly, is that whatever is on the other side, it's pure energy. And pure energy, like a radio wave or anything like that, a microwave, a television transmission, travels through this ether of the universe in ways that we are beginning to understand. And it's probably no different in the afterlife. And if you have that capability of picking up those signals, you're going to be able to hear things, and you may be able to communicate back with them. If you didn't have a radio right now, you wouldn't know how many radio transmissions there are out there, but there are hundreds and thousands of them. It's the same thing. I think once the right equipment is developed that allows us to bridge that gap between the physical and the non-physical, we're going to hear some incredible things out there.
Yeah, you know, and I'm sure you're right. But you bring up when you mention spirit comm, you know, you spend some time on that in your book, and there are those people that would attack spirit comm as being a hoax. And, you know, what is your opinion on that? I mean, you flesh that out for us, if you will, please, George.
Rosemary and I, when we put together Talking to the Dead, Eldon, we decided not to attack or to agree with any particular device or ability to communicate with the other side. What we wanted to do was research them, put them out, and let the readers decide what's there and what isn't. You're absolutely right. George Meeks, when he developed Spirit Comm, a lot of people claim, you know, this guy was an expert at faking this, and he did that. We don't take any particular sides because we don't know. We don't know, other than it was very strange, very unusual, and they have this uncanny ability to pick up sounds. Several years ago, Rosemary Ellen Guiley was in my studio, and she had what was called a Frank's box. It was developed by an old fellow named Frank. And she turned this thing on, and, you know, though we didn't have direct two-way communication, there was something out there. And, you know, and I questioned her. I said, Rosemary, how do we know we're not picking up some ham radio operator from somewhere or some, you know, distant radio signal? And she says, I don't think so. It just doesn't sound like that. It just sounds like we're listening in on a conversation from someplace a long, long way away. And so, you know, those are the things that are the marvels of it. I don't think, Eldon, our technology is 100% there yet. That gives us that ability to just tune it on and there you are. But I think we're getting closer and closer that we'll be able to decide and find out for ourselves what could be out there on the other side.
You know, George, when you say that, I've hosted a couple of shows with EVP experimenters, and I've listened to hours of recordings that have been taken. And, you know, some of it is, it's very difficult to believe that it's really, you know, someone talking. There's this whole idea, pareidolia, if you will, where, you know, I'm going to interpret the information out of it that you suggest to me. But some of it is very clear, and it really does, you know, push the buttons. It cause you to say, okay, now hold it. Maybe not all of these EVPs are legitimate, but there are some that just defy explanation. Have you actually done an EVP yourself?
I've been on some expeditions with EVPs. I haven't recorded any myself. We've played some of them on the air. They're very hard to hear, especially through the radio. But there are some very strange sounds out there, chilling sounds of like a child. You could hear them in the background going, you know, Mommy, where are you? Others that would go, get out, get out. Very faint. I mean, it's not like you and I are talking right now. But clearly there's something out there. I mean, EVP recordings, to me, are extremely baffling. I don't think there's some trickster involved, though out of 100 cases, you know, if 80 of them are frauds, that means you have 20 good legitimate ones. Right. But they're very strange. I mean, so you can pick it up. Joshua P. Warren, who's a paranormal researcher and a regular guest on Coast to Coast, he's convinced that EVPs are real. and that we're picking up, much like these voice communications with these devices to talk to the dead, we're picking up the spirit world, the other side. And it's one-way communication, but there's very strange things out there. And I think what makes it stranger is that they're so faint. They're just, they're not crystal clear, but truly you can tell that there's something out there. And it's beyond what you would hear on a radio show or anything else. I mean, you don't hear little kids going, "Mommy, where are you?" Or voices that say, "Get out, get out." I mean, so something's there.
Right. Now, you bring up a good point, and Rosemary introduced the idea in the first half of the hour when she talked about, not all of the spirits that you communicate with are benevolent.
That's right.
And in your book, you discuss, the ethics and the morality involved when you're attempting to contact the other side. And, of course, you're going to have to, deal with or separate the nonsense from the reality. So I guess my question, George, is do you feel that you've satisfied in your own mind the ethical and moral implications to talking to the dead?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, do we have the right to jump onto the other side? Do we have the right to do something that has been around since the beginning of time? These other dimensions, these other levels of existence, and are we broaching that? Are we violating anything by doing what we're doing? I guess I don't think so. I think the Creator gave us this ability to create and to think and develop and invent. And if we're smart enough to invent technology that allows us to cross that bridge to the other side, then so be it. But in so doing, you're absolutely right. There are other creatures, characters, entities that are out there that aren't very friendly, that have their own agenda. They could be demons, they could be misfits, they could be troubled souls from lives. They probably don't want to be interfered with. And, those are the ones you have to be careful of. I've cited in some of my earlier stories the Ouija board, an older version of communicating with the other side, old technology. But I think what it does, it opens up this portal to the other side. And the problem is, once you build that bridge, you have no idea what's coming over the other side. And, you could have spirits that are friendly, spirits that are not. And I have found with the Ouija board that some very bizarre things happen. And so in communicating, whether it's through high technology or old technology like the Ouija board, you have to be careful. It's not a game.
Okay, well, now you have piqued my interest, driven my curiosity. I have to ask you, you have experience with a Ouija board?
I did. A long time ago, I was given a Ouija board as a gift. And, I thought it was a toy. Here it is, this little thing with a planchette. You sit down and you have some fun with it. And I brought it into my studio. This was when I was doing my St. Louis local Nighthawk show. And I put it down on the table, and I was going to talk about the Ouija board, and we were going to go through it. And everything happened to me. Computers went out. My audio board had problems. My phone lines were crackly. It was one of the worst technical nights of my life. And I'm looking at this Ouija board going, man, this all happened when I brought this thing in the studio. I had a producer. His name was Howard Morton. And I said, Howard, do me a favor. Get rid of this thing. And he took it out and he put it in the office of our newsroom in our radio station. And at that moment he did that, everything worked again. The computers worked fine. The phone lines were crystal clear. The board was good. And I went, man, this is unbelievable. What I didn't know at the time was that in that newsroom there was a fellow by the name of Daryl, a dear friend of ours, who took the Ouija board home. And he decided to keep it for himself. So he took it and he left. Well, we really didn't know what happened to it. We figured somebody took it, but we didn't know exactly who. Yeah. Years later, I run into Daryl. He's no longer at the radio station. And he said, I got to talk to you about something. And I said, what? He said, remember that night you had that Ouija board and you were talking about it and you had Howard get rid of it and he brought it to the newsroom? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I took it home. And I said, oh, that's where it went. He says, oh, beyond that, George. He said, it ruined my life. I said, what? And he said, the moment I brought it home, I got into a car accident on the way home. I lost my job, lost my relationship. And he said everything was going wrong. Everything. He said, I got rid of it. I threw it in the garbage. And he said, when I did that, things started to get back to normal again. And I heard that, and I went, my gosh, whatever this thing is, it's a portal, and it's not a friendly one. Years later, on Coast to Coast, I had this grand idea to do a Ouija board show and a great experiment. So I had 3 people in the studio with me, Jordan Maxwell, Dr. Bruce Goldberg, the hypnotherapist, and Rosemary Ellen Guiley. And I polled all 3 of them about what do we do with the Ouija board. Well, Rosemary was for it. She said, give it a shot. I'm on the air now, ready to do this. Millions of listeners. And she said, let's do it. Let's go for it. I had the Ouija board in a different studio, so it wouldn't affect the one I was in. And she said, let's do it. Let's go for it. Goldberg was kind of on the fence. He didn't know what to do. Jordan Maxwell said, George, if you do this, I will walk off the set now. I want nothing to do with it. So I'm on the air live, Eldon, pondering, what am I going to do with this? Millions of people listening. Some people actually at home eating pizza, having a Ouija board party, waiting for the show. And I, on the air, said, folks, I'm going to not do this Ouija board experiment. I'm not going to do it. And not because I think anything is going to happen to me. To me, this thing is a piece of cardboard, as weird as it is, but I don't want anything to happen to you. I don't know what it is capable of doing through airwaves, through somebody's house, and I don't want to take the responsibility. So I didn't do it. I got a lot of emails from people who were very happy with the fact that I didn't do it. And then I got a few, emails from people who were very upset because they wanted to go through with it. They wanted this thing to happen. And but I think I made the right decision. It's not a toy. I would never buy it for somebody as a gift. And, it convinced me even more that there's something on the other side.
I listened to you tell that story, and I want our listening audience to understand that he writes like he talks. I mean, the book is just as exciting as the story you just heard. And you can listen to this guy every night of the week, 5 days of the week anyway, on Coast to Coast AM. All right, George, we only have a couple of more minutes, so there's so many things I could talk to you about, and you know that. I guess what I want to do as a last question is, your book points out that the other side is entirely different than what we might expect in a heaven-hell kind of scenario that we see in the Bible. It breaks out, various levels or degrees of existence that exist on the other side. Give us a 1-minute treatment on, just an overview on that, if you would. I'd like to spend more time, but that's about all we have.
Well, biblically, they talk about heaven and hell. Heaven, of course, being the grand place. You can imagine harps and clouds. And hell being, of course, a place of utter devastation and grief and horror and pain. We think otherwise. We think that there's a mesh, a blending of good and bad, evil and not evil. And that what heaven may be is a dimension where enlightened spirits go, where they've developed, where they've gotten better, and they're there, either waiting to be reincarnated or whether to continue moving up the ladder. And this thought of hell is truly just a dimension of where the bad entities are, the bad souls, the people who have done horrendous things on this planet before. And, I don't think they're tortured by any means. They just continue to evolve, too. They come back more and more. Their souls get reincarnated until they reach that level of perfection whether it takes 5 reincarnated times or 10,000. It just keeps happening. So the concept to me, heaven and hell, does not exist. The concept of good and evil on the other side truly exists.
You know, it's coasttocoastam.com. Is that right, George?
Yep, coasttocoastam.com is our website. You can go there, click a link that says stations, and find us any place in the country. We're on 560 radio stations right now, Eldon. We're on XM channel 168. We broadcast live at 10 o'clock Pacific time until 2 a.m. Pacific time, Monday through Friday, and then also Saturday and Sunday with my weekend hosts.
And I would encourage you all to sign up. There's a member program there. I sign up. I get broadcasts on my iPhone. I get all the latest news. I'm going to tell you, it is the one radio show, and I don't want to demote my own, but it's the one radio show that I find very important to listen to. George, thank you for being here. We're out of time. I want to thank all of you for listening, and until next week, remember, believing in yourself always matters.